Oh my gosh, you guys. This interview is a long time coming, and I'm really excited between sprinkling in interviews with women that are new to me and are new to women going big. I am also interviewing women that I am already familiar with and already have a very deep appreciation and admiration for. And one of those women is Venessa Wood. I could go on and on about all of the big things that Venessa Wood is doing, but I am going to let her tell you. So, Vanessa, first of all, welcome to the Women Going Big podcast. And second, how are you going big?
Oh my goodness. Well, first off, thank you for having me on today. I have been excited about this all week. Women going big. I love that phrase right there. So you already knocked it out of the water with that. So, how am I going big? Gosh, that's a big question because I can talk. Oh, that doesn't sound very humble, but I can tell you about 1,000 things that we're doing right now.
That's okay. This podcast is about you, so you're allowed to talk about all the things that you're doing.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Well, I'll say it's definitely a team effort, but I'll tell you what I'm focusing on right now that has really stretched me. And I am like living on a prayer and on my faith, which I've done throughout my Ag Women Connect career. But we are planning the first ever Ag Women Connect conference. And again, it's just one of those events where everything is aligning. Yes, I'm doing big and scary things that I've never done before, and I'm pushing my limits, but at the same time it has been like such a blessing too, because just like God is aligning us with the right people who need to come into this conference, who are going to be speaking at the conference, and I'm just super excited about that. It's going to be September the 26th to the 28th in Fort Worth at the Will Rogers Memorial Center in the Pioneer Room. And I have no doubt that it's going to sell out. It allots for 600 people. And Krysta, I'm just gonna go on all in on this. So there was a remark that got back to me, and I mean, it doesn't matter who said it, but somebody said that they didn't think Ag Women Connect was professional enough for them to join, and that has kind of stuck with me for a while. And I'll just say that they are completely mistaken on that. Outside of Ag Women Connect, I've started to get. I'm very politically motivated, and I've gone to quite a few of those events, and I'll just say that they're obviously the most extreme professional event that I've ever been to, right? And so I'm really trying to, or I'm not trying, I am transferring that into this conference as far as the level of professionalism. And also, we're not just a networking group of women in agriculture. We go so much deeper than that, and that's what really excites me, because we are about change here in Ag Women Connect. So we're going to have women coming in and talking about policy and advocacy, ag business, which is huge, ag marketing. The panels are going to be fire. And this is already confirmed. Gatlin Didier and his sweet family, Granny, and Gay Bar is coming to talk at the Ag Women Connect Gala, which supports our Ag Women Connect Foundation. And if you know anything about them, they're extremely faith-based, and like their whole goal, their whole mission is based upon seeking and speaking the truth in agriculture. And that right there really aligns with not only our mission in Ag Women Connect, but also our mission with the foundation as well. And so, with that being said, I'll also say that we're going to have a prayer breakfast Saturday morning. And like that was one of the first things on my list that we were going to include in this conference, is that the world needs more prayer. The world needs more Christian leaders. I think that comes natural within the agriculture industry, right? But we invite everybody to be a part of the ag industry. That's part of our mission. And so I just think it's so important and essential to have that prayer breakfast and to pray over our farmers and ranchers across the nation and the people who are making a difference.
I 10 time agree on everything that you said. I This is an interesting dynamic for me on this podcast because, and I was really worried about this when I launched it, but like I interview women from all backgrounds. Like from every, like I interviewed somebody earlier who's in India and she's a yoga instructor. And I think, and maybe this is like just part of the purpose of my mission, like my overall purpose and intention is like, I hope that through these conversations and through the conversations that you're having, is that we can not only educate, but at least like give people the information about where their food comes from and
Yeah.
let them know that it's family. It's families that are raising their food. It's not animals that are locked up in boxes, you know, being fed once a day and not being taken care of. So with that, I want to take a step back, and everything that you said is super super important. But what's more important is what came before this, because you have a deep seated and deep rooted passion, not only for women, but for agriculture. So I want to explore the first steps of what Ag Women Connect was, where this deep need for connection and network and relationships for you came from. And maybe we can kind of tell the story backwards. We started with where you are now, but how did you get here?
Oh, well, I appreciate that question. You know, Krista, it's one of my challenges within Ag Women Connect, and I'll get to your question, is that we're such a multifaceted platform, right? We're encouraging other women to tell their story, but yet I have held back on my own story, right? And so that's kind of something, or that is something that if you want to hear the full story, you're everybody at the conference is gonna hear it. And maybe I wasn't ready to tell my full story too, if I'm being quite honest. So I'll definitely do the best I can right now because I think it's a little bit of a trigger. And I'm glad that you're really one of the first people who have asked me about how I started Ag Women Connect because it is a little bit emotional. So I'll tell you, for 10 years, okay, so you think about a woman who is going through life. For 10 years, I prayed to God, like, what is my purpose in life besides being a mother and a wife? And those two things are extremely important, and a daughter of Christ, of course. But I just knew that I was always scratching the surface. Like, whatever job that I had at home, one of our main goals when we got married, Krista, was to raise our kids. And I knew I was never going to be an 8 to 5er. You know, I just, even as a little girl, like I just knew that I was going to have my own business. And so, like, the freedom of that, I've always enjoyed. So I say all that because I started in a lot of home based businesses, and I'm very grateful for those businesses. But yet, I always knew, like, no matter what goal that I had achieved, or if I had gone to the top of the company, I was not fulfilled. Like, I just knew that God had a bigger purpose for me, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And I can't tell you how many times, I'm sure you've experienced this, and a lot of women have experienced this. Is, I feel like, especially if you were raised in agriculture, like, uh, I don't know, success looks different to everybody, but it's just like once you get to the top of something, it still wasn't enough for me. Does that make sense? I just kept going and kept persevering and finding other things to do, and so I had a pretty good feeling that the company that I was with at the time, it was my intuition was kicking in, and I had a feeling that one day I was going to wake up and not have a job anymore. And that did happen 6 months after God put the idea of Ag Women Connect in my head. And Kaylee McEnany, I don't know if you've ever heard her story, but I listened to it a couple of weeks ago at the Hemp Hill convention, and her whole speech was such a time as this. And honestly, it just gave me chill bumps because that's what I named our Ag Women Connect conference. And another, it was just like, okay, this is one of those divine appointments that God put me in this room to listen to her story. And but she said there's times that when you're living your best life and things are great, that sometimes we slack in our relationship with God, right? So we'll hear him whisper during those times, but it's during the times of your trials and tribulations where he shouts at you. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was literally when he like shouted Ag Women Connect at me. I had no doubt like what I was supposed to do. And so I love telling people that no matter where you are in life, you've got to pray like it depends on God, but act like it depends on you. And so when you put those two things together, it's extremely dynamic. And that's what I did. So I had my experience from my home-based businesses, but again, just living on a prayer and faith that the business plan that I put together for Ag Women Connect was going to work. And a couple of months later, after officially starting the business and getting everything set up, one of my, I didn't know her very well, but one of the women who came to our first chapter meetings wrote me a $350 check and said, I believe in you. I believe in your mission. Like, get after it. And it was like at that moment that I was like, okay, like I'm actually created something that's women are that they believe in. And I mean, it was nothing for her to write that check and say, I want to be your first member. Let's go. Yeah, I'll just say to anybody who, and this is what I really like to speak on too, because I think finding our purpose in life obviously looks different for a lot of people. There's people who find that immediately, even as a child, and they stay in that purpose. But for a lot of, I think, especially women, just because from the ages of like 15 to 25, think about it. You're graduating high school, you're coming into college, you're getting married, you're having children, then you're trying to figure out your career. Like those are major, major decisions that can affect your purpose. And so if Ag Women Connect can be that network of strong Christian women who can say, look, here's your opportunities. Here's somebody that could speak to you in this area that can encourage your purpose or even refine that purpose, that's where it hits at, like personally for me. And people ask, well, what is the question? The question is, why did you start Ag Women Connect? And it's because I wished I would have had this type of network during that time, and I didn't. Because who knows where I would have been if I would have had strong leaders and women who had been there, done that, just reach their hand out and say, look, I'm willing to help you. Let me know what your interests are, and let's figure this thing out.
And I just want to add on to this and just maybe give a little bit of the conversation to my own experience with Ag Women Connect. So I think it was over a year ago, but not by much. Maybe a year and a couple months ago that I reached out to you because I saw what you were doing and I loved it. I think that you were one of the most, I don't want to say outspoken, but you were the one that was putting the information in front of people. And I can give some examples, but I think that your network was the most readily available, even though you're based in Texas and I'm based in Phoenix. And it's crazy to me that I was able to A, connect with you, but then B, once I learned that what you were about and I learned what your mission was, and it was connecting women in agriculture, the world needs more of that. Like, we need more of that. Like, agriculture needs more women like that. And the other half of your story is your tagline for your podcast, which is Your Story Matters.
Mm-hmm.
So it all goes hand in hand with connecting women with other strong women, but it's also giving women a platform to share their story regardless of where they come from, regardless if
Yeah.
they work in ag, regardless if they're a farmer or a rancher. And for me, not being a farmer, not being a rancher, I am a first generation horse girl, and sadly, I'm not even that right now. So for me to feel like I have a place where my voice matters and my story matters, that was huge for me. And I needed that, and I didn't have it. So that's what you're providing from somebody that sees what you're doing on the outside. That is the effect that you're having on women, is giving them a place to belong.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, I'm so glad that you're on this journey with me, and you have been such a blessing to Ag Women Connect. Obviously, I didn't know anything about podcasting or being on a radio show or anything like that, but that's been the fun of it. Like, if everything was just handed over to us on a silver platter and said, hey, this is what you do and this is how you get there, then there wouldn't be any fun in it, right?
Yes. Yeah, it
Yeah.
has been an absolute joy helping you build this and seeing what comes out of it, seeing what the next big thing is that you're working on. And that's something that I really admire about you is that, and I was going to mention this earlier when you said that, I had reached the top of the business I was in and it wasn't enough. Like
Mhm.
I still felt like there was something more for me. And I really relate to that because I still feel like that. I still feel like the work that I'm doing is barely scratching the surface of what not only what I'm capable of, but what my true purpose is. And so I feel like I'm constantly digging, but for the like what I wanted to say on that was that as entrepreneurs, I don't I feel like our purpose might always be changing. And I think
Mhm.
that that might have fulfilled the purpose at the time for you, but it's playing into the bigger picture of, what is our true purpose? And we have a lot of these little steps along the way. And so I don't necessarily know if we're ever going to get to a place where we're like, yes, like this is it. Because
Yeah.
we're always going to be adding things. You're always going to be adding new events on how to connect women and grow Ag Women Connect.
Oh, you said that so beautifully. I could not have said that any better, Krista. And this is something I said when I spoke at the Cowgirl Gathering is when you're reaching for those goals, like it's not the goal itself that's going to fulfill us. It's the person that we're becoming when we are reaching that goal. And that plays into exactly what you said is our purpose is going to be constantly changing because we are constantly changing. We're getting better. We're improving. We're doing more. Once we get to one place, then we we stretch it a little bit more and we get to the next place. So it is taking those steps. Yeah, I loved what you said there.
I would love to chat about. So, like I said, there's probably a lot of women listening. I've had a lot of women on the show that are not, I don't want to say at all connected to agriculture, but that's probably accurate. And this is so interesting now being a middleman between agriculture and non-agriculture. But what would you say to a woman that is confused by what she sees at the grocery store, isn't sure where to even start with knowing where her food comes from? What's the first step? What can she do to be better connected?
Well, first of all, I would just kind of like to relieve some pressure there because I feel like it is like a stressful thing to go to the grocery store now. I mean, there's so many things out there that are falsely labeled. I'll first off and just say your food is safe. Okay? Like it's safe. There's nothing in there and that's meant to make you ill or anything like that. But as far as like the first step, I've got two things to tell women. One is if you really want to get healthy and you want to kind of lay all of that confusion to rest, go buy from a local farmer and rancher, right? Like they're the ones out there. What is this the statistic like? Where your food comes from is 97% owned from family farms, right? It's 97 or 98%. So you can't go there's absolutely no way you can go wrong from buying your produce or your beef and meat from a local farmer and rancher. And so if you're listening to this and you live in an urban place and you're from the city, you can do that from literally Instagram or Facebook. You can go find a local farmer or rancher who is selling beef and produce that way, or you can go to your local farmers market and just travel out of town 10 or 15 minutes, and I guarantee you'll find one on the weekend. And then the second thing too is if you really want to learn where your food comes from and get educated, then be a part of Ag Women Connects because this is something we talk about a lot. I mean, it's just about every conversation I have is people are wanting to know more about their food sources because you've got there's just a lot of things going on. You've got this lab grown meat that's been approved here in the United States, which is atrocious to the ag industry, and I would definitely not recommend doing that. Just use your common sense too, as well. Like if you can't read the ingredients on the labels of your food, then it's probably not very good for you. And it's really as simple as that.
And I do want to expand on that a little bit because I also know, for instance, in for people that are in food deserts, there might not be farmers markets. There might not be local farmers and ranchers within 40 miles. A lot of the meat and the produce in the grocery store, unless it's imported, which it will say on there, all of that comes from family owned farms and ranches also, you know. So whether in absolutely buy local, like I 100% support that, I also know that it's not accessible to some people. And like those are the people that I think need to hear this message the most, is that they can support agriculture without doing those things, by just knowing that, like you said, 97, 98% of farms in the US are owned by families. There
Mm-hmm.
is no big farms, like in terms of, oh, balloons. That's so funny. It's excited about that. There is no, I mean, you could say, you could use the word conventional, but that it's a numbers thing. It's based on how many animals they have, not there's no difference in practice, there's no difference
Right.
in welfare, there's no difference in the product itself. So just
Mm-hmm.
knowing that regardless of where you shop, that you are supporting American agriculture and proud to do that. I saw this trend going around. It'll tie in, I promise. I saw this trend going around and it says, "What do you think your industry needs?" basically. So, I'm going to ask you the same question. What do you think women in agriculture need? Like what can we be doing better in our industry?
Gosh, that's such an easy question. Unity. Unity. We talked about this earlier this week, just about it's not just in agriculture, Krista. I mean, it's really in any industry, but we got to stop attacking ourselves, attacking our friends or attacking other people within our industry. And unfortunately, it's happened in the ag industry with the fear-based marketing and whatnot, but in other things too. And I'll just say, as the founder and the leader of Ag Women Connect, I don't put up with it. And we've been super blessed. I mean, you've been part of it, and we haven't had any drama within our own organization. It's been absolutely incredible. What I think though too is because like the women who are coming into this organization, they are very faith based. They have a relationship with God. They're just very very positive women. And I mean, some of y'all might be listening to this and saying there's no way, but I mean honestly, I, I don't know what else to say other than that God's had his hand on Ag Women Connect, and it's just been really neat to see. But I do see it within people outside of our organizations or other organizations. I just got a message this week about other women just not being nice, and they've dissolved their chapters because that's just one thing I don't put up with. I don't put up with a negative mindset and people who just can't be nice to each other, because you cannot grow in that environment, period. And I'm just really honored to say that we don't have that in Ag Women Connect.
What I also like is that you are, this might sound dramatic, maybe not, but you in Ag Women Connect are like a beacon for women. Like the kind of woman that you attract is the kind of woman that is setting out to make a difference not only in their lives but their communities and agriculture. You have women that are just like me, not connected to agriculture, but are interested in it and want to help and want to be part of their community making a
Mhm.
difference. And so I think that that is like one of the really big differentiating factors, is that the kind of women that you're attracting don't have the time to be tearing other women down.
Totally true.
And that's another thing with this podcast, is that like I want to be able to strip away the things that people seem to latch onto for that, like the
Mhm.
judgment and the labels and the stereotypes, like, because at our core, like, that unity, that feeling of unity should be the same whether you're a farmer, a dairy farmer, a mom, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter. But what does matter is that unity and being able to have the same goal, the same respect, and the same values.
Right. I like that unity is such a broad word, but it goes further than just getting along with other women. It's the fact that, and it's in our mission statement, that we accept and we welcome all roles of women in agriculture and outside of agriculture, because guys, like it we there's no way our industry is going to survive and thrive without our younger generations coming up and other people bringing something unique and different to the table. Just because it's unique and different doesn't mean it's wrong. And that's what's been so incredible to watch, Krista, is that you've got these younger women, or women who aren't necessarily connected to agriculture at the time, that are bringing solutions to the table, as well as the women who are fourth, fifth, sixth generation farmers and ranchers. And it can be done. Like, we're getting along, we're discussing topics like this, we have think tanks, we're just constantly thinking of ways of how we can improve Ag Women Connect, but also how we can educate others. And it takes all of us.
It really does. And I really want to encourage anybody who's listening that, I don't want to even say is interested in agriculture, but I think that this can go to any kind of higher calling that you feel like you are drawn to, is follow it. Because
Yeah.
you're going to run into people and you're going to meet people that are meant to help you get there.
Well, I appreciate you said that, because I think it is important, Krista, to be a part of other organizations besides just sticking with one. I mean, that's how I've been able to grow personally, like the whole political thing, right? Didn't think I'd ever get excited about that, but I am. And I feel like I'm making a difference and people are listening to me. But I would have never known if one of my good friends wouldn't have invited me to a meeting and said, "Hey, we could use your input," or "I really love what you're doing in agriculture, like can we lean on you when things come up with policy in that area?" And I was like, of course. But it was somebody else, reaching out and saying, "Hey, you should be a part of this." And so I do recommend just not confining yourself to one organization or on one group to hang out with, because I feel like you'll find value in several groups.
Well, and I think that the power of your network, right? Like, if we talk about the power of relationships, is, you can only grow so much in one circle. Like, at some
Hmm.
point, you're going to tap out the circle that you're in, which is fine.
Yeah.
I think that you can continue to grow and evolve and change within the circle that you're in. But how much power can you bring in by adding in one more, or going just outside of that circle and, making another loop? I think your options are endless in that case.
Yeah. And that's why the networking is so, like, I hope that everybody that listens to this, if you take anything home right now with you from from this conversation, is that there's so much power in networking. Do not ever underestimate it. And I mean, there's just women out there who are willing to help others and don't ever feel guilty for taking not advantage of it, but just like, don't ever feel guilty to, for one, ask questions. That's another big one, is that you've got to ask questions, you've got to advocate for yourself and what you're passionate for. But the only way that you're going to get further in your life and in your mission is if you network, period.
Well, and the other thing that I always try to make sure in the podcast is that I don't want this conversation for somebody who might be starting at the beginning to feel like what we're talking about isn't accessible to them right now. If it's wanting to know more about where your food comes from, send me an email. Send Venessa an email. Contact her on our website. And I guarantee you, I will for sure respond. And I can also guarantee that Venessa will respond. So this conversation isn't so out of reach for you. This shouldn't be, I don't want this to be some fill your cup fluffy conversation. Like this is something that A, I think needs attention, but B, you can take action on. And same with the networking. Regardless if you are a professional working for a company or you're a freelancer or whatever the case may be, if even if you're just somebody that's interested,
Mhm.
start Googling. Start seeing what's in your immediate area. Talk to your local chamber of commerce. These are all very actionable things that we're talking about here. And I don't want people to forget that. So, we talked a little bit about what the future holds for Ag Women Connect. And I know your sights are pretty well set just to get through that event in September, but like if you're dreaming really big, what do you want Ag Women Connect to look like in 5 years?
I think we'll definitely be worldwide. It won't be just United States for one. We're making some pretty good connections up there in Canada. So I'm hoping, actually, I think we could do that this year, is to reach out to some ladies up there in Canada. But education is a huge part of how we're going to improve agriculture, right? And I would like to see Ag Women Connect be the hub of education of really anybody wanting to know literally anything, any kind of resource about agriculture, to come to Ag Women Connect and find that. And I think we've gotten a pretty good start on it, but I mean, that's a really broad statement because education, I mean, we can educate people on thousands of things, but I think it's the way that we're going to do it. So, as well as I do, is people are learning more and more off of self educating themselves from their phones and their computers. And so we've got to figure out a way to do that, which I think we are. We're moving in that direction. We're definitely telling stories not only through the podcast, but through our blog and then your home TV, which is incredible. So, I'm super excited about that. So it's just really building more onto our mission and seeing where that goes. But I know it'll be big. It's already proven into what we're doing. So I don't know if that's a big enough dream or not, but I would say it is, to be the number one hub of women in agriculture to come to define what they need. I think that's pretty incredible.
I think so too. And I just want to brag on you a little bit more is that I think that you are the epitome of somebody that had something on their heart and was digging and scratching and doing the things that you thought you needed to do for 10 years until this idea was planted in your head, and then you went for it. You went all in. You just moved forward with such bravery and courage. I There aren't a lot of people, not even just women, there's not a lot of people that would do that. So I just want to make sure that you know how big the things that you're doing are, and just that you're so brave for doing this.
Thank you. That's heartfelt. It hasn't been easy. I'll tell you a little bit. All right, I'm going to throw in one more piece that people haven't heard, and then the rest is for the conference. But so when I did lose that job 6 months later, that was 6 months into Ag Women Connect, and there was a lot of things that kind of happened within a month's period. But I looked up one day from making like a 5-figure income monthly, it's so like literally $500. And I was like, okay, God has a sense of humor. I'm like, all right, I see what you're doing here. So I was building my foundation of Ag Women Connect here in Lubbock, Texas, right? So you have to get the foundation, you got to get it right locally. But I was holding back, right? Those 6 months, it was great, but I knew I had a much, much bigger vision for Ag Women Connect. And so God was like, okay, you no longer have a job. So are you gonna do this or what? Like, what are we doing here? And so that's like the conversation I was having in my mind. But my father had passed, I guess back then it would be about 6 years prior to. And we were blessed to take over some of that land. And I talked and consulted with my husband and with my brother. I mean, it was my farm. I mean, I was ultimately the decision maker. But Chris, I actually sold a farm to start this company, and that was hard. Like, I'm getting emotional talking about it. I don't know if I would have done it if it was my one and only farm that my dad passed down to me. Thankfully, I've got a couple others that we lease out, but that was a big step for me. And God told me to build an office, and so we took that money and we built an office, and I was able to sink a little bit of those funds into starting Out Women Connect, because I don't think people understand, like, when you build a business, there's a lot of hidden costs in there that you're just completely unaware of. And I learned that the hard way. Like, I didn't really have anybody. I mean, I did, in a sense, have people helping me, but you know what I'm saying. There's just a lot of things that I had to figure out. And so I appreciate you saying being bold and courageous, because that's a big part of my story, and that's a big part of Ag Women Connect. And I think too, just with what's going on in the world, God is asking us to be bold and courageous, literally, in like everything that we're doing.
Well, in the recurring theme that I keep having with women that are going big is, if not you, then who?
Mm-hmm.
If it's not you taking this action, who is it going to be? Only you have the power that you do. Only you have the connections that you do. And nobody else can make the same impact that you can. We can do the same thing. You know, side by side, we could be doing the same exact thing. Your impact is going to be different than mine. And it doesn't matter whatever you feel called to do, go be brave and do that. Because if not you, then who else?
And we don't want anybody else telling our story, because so if we don't do it, somebody else will, and they usually do it with a different intent.
Yes. Yeah, it's not going to be good. Or they're going to leave out the best parts. How dull if somebody else is telling your story. Oh my gosh, I love this conversation. It just lights me up. And I think that I shied away from it too for so long. I was scared. Like I said, I was scared to launch this podcast because I'm like, I've built my network so far into the agriculture world, and I don't regret that at all. I love it so much. But I'm like, now I'm talking to women that aren't in it. You know, how is this going to work? But it has. So, and I don't know where it's going to lead, but I'm being bold and I'm being brave.
I'm proud of you. You've definitely got my attention, because I was totally stalking your Instagram. I was like, what is this? Like, has Krysta had this all along?
I have been kind of quiet about it. Like I said, I really was sweating. I was really sweating. I'm like, man, these women are not even going to know what to do with this. So,
Oh, I love it. It's like your little ace in the hole. And that's another tidbit there, is like, so you got to keep some things private, ladies. You just do. You can't be an open book all the time, especially with your business and your private life. Keep those things private and keep those aces up your sleeve, because sometimes, well, no, not sometimes. It's a fact. Like, the less people that know like what you're doing, just let your success show. Let your success show when you get it done. And you definitely impress me.
well, thank you. And the other thing too, though, is that you're always going to have somebody that's going to talk you out of it. You know, and I think that that's always my thing, because not that I necessarily go for outside validation. I do like and value other people's opinions, though. Like, I really do. Like, I have very close friends that I value the opinions of. But if I were to have taken that idea to them and they didn't see it through my own lens of what I hoped this to be, they would have talked me right out of it. And they would have probably given me some really good reasons why I didn't need to be doing this.
You're exactly right. Oh, I'm so glad that you added that. That's powerful.
You know, like you said, sometimes you just got to keep things up your sleeve, keep working on it until it feels whole to you, or at least whole enough that you can put it out into the world and not care about what people think. So, because like I said, you can always be talked out of something. Always.
Well, I'll say this. I had a conversation yesterday with Casey, our Casey Bowl. And she said, Vanessa's just like, are you doing all this conference by yourself? Because it just seems that you are. And I said, in a way, I am, because I don't like when you get too many chiefs in the room, nothing's going to happen. And I was like, there's some things that I do have to do on my own for this. And then I can open up the gate and say, hey, here's where I need a committee. Here's where I need help. We're doing this. Can you, who wants to volunteer? Who wants to help with this? But like the foundational part of putting a big event together, you can't, it, too many opinions that can hold you back. And I have been there, done that, obviously. So I hope somebody hears that today and just know, just like put those blinders on and just keep putting one step in front of the other and get your foundation built.
Mm. And I read something really beautiful today in a book that I'm reading. And it essentially said that your feet intuitively know where to go. You aren't actively thinking about where to put your next step. Your feet do it themselves. And at one point, like one foot steps, and then you have to lift the other one and trust that you know where it's going to land. And all you're doing is focusing on where you're going, and your feet are doing the work. So if we applied that same mentality to our lives where we are, we are only looking forward at what the future holds and trusting God, ourselves, to know where our next step is going to go and where we're supposed to be led, that's powerful. So,
That's huge. Okay, so I have to add this real quick. So I had this written down. I don't know if y'all have watched the movie Cabrini. You should watch it. But I got this, and oh, this gives me chill bumps because it's basically what you said, just in another way. And it's begin the mission, and the means will come. So we're not talking just about funding, right? When it's means, like the means is people, opportunity. It can be funding, but I thought that was really, really powerful. It's like you you just have to start. You've got to start with what you have, and everything else will fall into place if your intentions are pure and if you keep your eye on the mission. You just keep going forward.
but the other thing with that too is that you have to show that, and I don't want to have to say that you have to prove to anybody that your idea is worth it or your mission is worth it, but you have to show somebody that, hey, like I'm taking the initiative here. Like I am taking that first step. I am called to this mission and I'm ready. Here I am. Like let's do this. So, yeah, I love that. I always like to give my guests at the end the opportunity if there's anything, and we have covered a ton today, but I always do like to give you the opportunity to throw in anything else that you have on your heart, that you've been chewing on in this conversation, that you want to leave our listeners with, and then we'll wrap up on how our listeners can connect with you and find you online.
Hmm. I love that. Gosh. Okay, so there was something we were talking about when you were saying you kind of held back from starting this podcast, or you had doubts. And where do you think that stems from? Because I think a lot of women feel that way. And there was something I was listening to the other day that was really good. And I know it's the devil just coming in, right? He's coming in to create chaos and to disturb our thoughts. And so we have a choice, ladies. We have a choice to either serve our weaknesses or serve our purpose. We can't do both. So when you come into those times where you're afraid or you just don't know the outcome, then that's your weakness showing, which is fine. Like we all have weaknesses. That's the devil getting in there. And so I'll just say, like, you can either feed into that or you can feed into your purpose and your mission. So I know that kind of sounds black and white, but maybe it should. Maybe it shouldn't be complicated. So I'll just encourage anybody who is there or been there or wants to improve that is get into the book. And if you can't get into the book every day, and I can't, or I guess I could, but I fall short of that sometimes, Krysta. But I love getting on podcasts. I listen to Joyce Meyer's at least once or twice a day. She's got these little 14, 15-minute clips, but it's just enough to kind of get me through if I'm having a hard day. Or and you read, so just make it a point to get into the word and just to seek God throughout your decisions. We make 35,000 decisions a day, Krysta. 35,000. That's a lot. So I think about, that little phrase right there. And with every decision, just ask God for his guidance, asking for discernment. And ever since I've kind of thought about that, I'm like, okay, I've got some really big decisions to make today, or some things that, like writing these contracts to bring these speakers coming in. For some reason, it's just been a little intimidating for me, right? But pray about it, ask God about it. It's just seemed to help me a lot. So I guess that's my final thought.
I think just to tack on to that, you asked, where that fear stemmed from. And I think that we're all allowed to be scared. We're all allowed to be a little fearful. What we're not allowed to do is let that fear consume us, or like have it decide what our actions are. So if I were to have let that fear take over, I wouldn't be having this conversation. And I wouldn't have had the same I wouldn't have had this conversation with 20 other women. And it goes back to the if not me, then who? If it's not me having these conversations, who else is going to do it? And maybe that's, what is that word, like self-indulging, or the word I'm trying to say, like very like selfish of me to think that. But really truly, like nobody's going to tell a story like I can. And like I really truly believe that women's stories deserve to be told, regardless of the background.
Yeah, regardless if you have 200 followers or 2 million followers, we need to get back to that in Ag Women Connects, as far as like that was part of our original branding. And it's something you're doing too, is like, I don't care, how big of a presence you have on social media, or, what you're doing and who you're rubbing elbows with. Like, you have a story and it deserves to be heard.
I think that's a great place to wrap up. Venessa, I loved this conversation. And if our listeners loved it as much as I did, where can they connect and follow you online?
Oh, I love it. So basically, everything is Ag Women Connect on Facebook, Instagram. TikTok is Ag Women Connect channel. LinkedIn is a little different. You can personally follow me, and it's Venessa Joy, and it's spelled Venessa, and then Joy. I've loved LinkedIn. I know that you like it too, Krysta. And then our website, of course, is just agwomenconnect.com.
Perfect. And to make it really easy, I have all those links in the show notes for you guys. So head over there if you guys want to connect further. Venessa, like I said, this conversation was a breath of fresh air. I think I really needed to have this conversation today. And I hope that our listeners got as much out of it as we did. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for interviewing me. You're a natural. You're really good at this.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in today. I appreciate all of you as well. And we will see you next Thursday with another interview. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you later.